First of all, before I get started, I want to know from you guys, leave a comment below. What was your favorite sale of this year, 2022? Or what was your top sale maybe? What was the most interesting one? Whatever your criteria is for being your top sale of the year. It doesn't even have to be a high monetary value, but maybe your return on investment was really good. You got it for free. Any of that kind of interesting story, I would love to hear that. So please feel free to leave that comment below. Okay, so I've got some space over here so I can leave room for some pictures and screenshots, and I will get to work finding pictures so you can understand what I'm talking about when I say the things that have sold. Okay, so we are gonna start right away. Now I'm starting right away with one that was in one of my first What Solds back in October, but it's such an interesting one, so if you're new here, this will be new to you. This was a head vase. It's called a head vase, basically because it's a vase that's shaped like a head, as you can see. And the brand on this one is Inarco, made in Japan. Now, this one is very unusual because of the size of it. So head vases have been kind of a reselling thing in the vintage community and a collecting thing for a while. When I was first starting reselling, I was bound and determined to find a head vase to flip. Prices have kind of gone down over the years, but especially if a lot of the head vases, they're from mid-century. They were vases that florists came up with, and you could deliver, a floral bouquet in one of these head vases. Now, a lot of them have jewelry, like maybe pearls around the neck or earrings. They have eyelashes, things like that. So condition is really important. And the more of the original jewelry and accessories that are there, the better it is. Now, this one was 10.5 inches. So that's really unusual. Most of them are a lot smaller. And so I went into my local Goodwill and I looked in their little case, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's the biggest head vase I've ever seen. And I'm like, they probably are asking an arm and a leg for this. So I just went and shopped, and they had things out on the counter, out on the shelves for $50, $60. And I was like, I've never seen a head vase that big. So I didn't really know the value or anything. So I was just curious. I think I had already checked out. And it turned out one of the cashiers I knew pretty well was standing right by the case when I left. And so I said, you know what, can I just take a look at that? So I pull it out, and they're asking like $4 for it. So the only reason it was in the case was not because they thought it was valuable, but they just didn't want it to get broken, which was awesome. $4 for this head vase. And I ended up selling it. It was listed for a while, and I did find comps that were closer to like 400, but it was listed for several months. And then I finally got a $250 offer. And I said, hey, you know what? That is good enough for me. And so, of course, they were a little concerned that we package it safely and correctly. But since my husband is the master packer, he got it to its new home, I think in Florida, across the country, all in one piece. So that was really exciting. So head vases, not just all of them, but look for the good jewelry, look for no broken eyelashes, things like that. And they can do pretty good. Okay, so this next one, let's switch total gears and go into a piece of clothing. Now, this is a Bolo brand. If you don't know what Bolo, it's be on the lookout. So it's a good brand to kind of keep in the back of your head when you're out thrifting. The brand is Dixon, and they're usually flannel shirts. So it's the Dixon Flannel Company. I found this on our trip to visit my folks back in September, and I listed it while I was there. So this is not a flannel shirt, and it was more like one of those silky polyester type things, and it's a Hawaiian shirt. So completely not what they normally do, but I knew that brand, Dixon. And then it had the added bonus of that it was a cross branding thing with Snap-on tools. And Snap-on has its following and its collector base and everything like that. So I knew it was a good deal either way. So it was in really good condition. And so this shirt sold for $90. Now, the Dixon flannels, I think they do them kind of like limited release and people collect them and things like that. So there are certain patterns in the Dixon flannels that can sell for hundreds of dollars. I've never found one of the flannel shirts, but I usually try to take a look at most flannel shirts when I'm at the thrift store. So you can add that Dixon flannels to your BOLO list. Okay, next one, number 3, is we are going to talk about suspenders. Okay, so these were 2 pairs of suspenders that I got at, and I'll tell you where I got them in a minute, but what was interesting about these suspenders was that they had, I'll have pictures up here, but they had very interesting pictures. One was roosters, I believe, and the other one was, I think the original name was like acrobat or strongman type design on it. So I did find the original ad for one of the sets of suspenders. The brand is Calvin Curtis, and the ones I found were the original ones. So later on, like in the 80s or 90s, Trafalgar, which is actually a really good brand for suspenders, keep an eye out for those anyway. They got the rights to reprint those patterns, and those can still sell pretty well. But these were the original ones, and I really wasn't sure. I think I asked in the vintage tie group that I know on Facebook, like if anyone had any opinions about whether the originals would sell better than the repops. And they said, someone who kind of followed that thing, he said that it's kind of hit or miss. It's like it depends on the pattern, that you would think that they would be crazy collectible, but for some reason they're just kind of overlooked. So I really wasn't sure what to expect with it, but I ended up getting, for the Acrobat one, I ended up getting $135. And then for the Roosters, I got $50. And that was mostly because it had a little, not damage, but it just needed a little bit of repair. Some glue had come undone, and it could be sewn back up again. So anyway, I was super happy with that. Now, as far as where I found them, I'm going to do a video one of these days when I get back over there. But one of the most unique thrifting places I have in my town is at the, I meant to look this up. So maybe I'll put the name here. But it's a county office in my town. And I think it has to do with property taxes and things like that. And so when they don't have, when they end up with estates, right? So if people had back taxes and they died, the state or the county gets the property of their estates, and then they sell off some things to try to recoup some of their losses. So they just have this room in their new little office building. They just have a room that's like this ongoing estate sale. So I had been to it years ago, but then they moved buildings and I kind of lost track of it. And so I found it, and yeah, it's like right there, I don't know, like by DMV or whatever. You just kind of walk past all the people in line and go back there, and then they have a counter to buy the things. So my first trip there, I found a few things, but I found the suspenders, and they were about $4 a piece. So that was really interesting, and not that I expect to find 1950s suspenders very often, but now I understand that there's a reproduction and then the original, and to kind of keep my eye out for that. Okay, let's move on to number 4. Number 4 is this really awesome cobalt blue poison bottle. I found this just sitting on the shelf at the thrift store, and I thought for sure it was just a reproduction, but I think it was like $6 or $8 or something. I mean, it wasn't super cheap, but I was just like, you know what, this is interesting enough that I'm willing to take a chance looking at it and just researching it. Sometimes I'll just buy things that I'm not positive on just to get the knowledge and to do the research on them. So it's this bottle, it says poison. It said, oh, see, I forgot to write that down. It had words about not drinking this, and there was something very specific about its shape. So it was considered a coffin-shaped bottle, and it had a flat back. So all those things, as I was researching, I got to realize more and more that this was probably not a reproduction, but that it was actually an antique bottle. And so what made mine sell for $115 was its size. So there was a lot listed for sale that were a lot smaller. This one was 20 ounces. It was about 8 inches or something tall. And yeah, I was really excited. It sold for $115. Let's see, what do we want to talk about next? Let's talk about some sneakers. So these aren't new. I know sneakerheads are all into different, newer sneakers can be really profitable. I don't know anything about them. But I was at an estate sale, and it was an estate sale that was running for several weekends. And this was my second weekend, and they had brought some new things out. And downstairs in the basement, they had a couple rooms that were just clothing kind of laid out on tables and things like that. So I was with my husband that particular time, and I was still on one side of the room, and he had moved around to the other, and he picked up a pair of Converse sneakers, and he showed them to me, and I was like, yes, just get those, put them on our pile. So they were like $3. And I knew vintage Converse, especially for $3, that's totally going to be worth the gamble, I guess you could call it. And so we ended up putting them on auction and selling them for $202.50. So it turned out that they were from the 1970s. There's lots of guides. There's things online. I looked at a bunch of older listings for vintage Converse. We had personally sold some vintage Converse back many, many years ago. And so I think that's what kind of caught my husband's eye, was to look for vintage Converse. You can look and see if it says made in the USA, and those are always going to sell a little bit better. So these were 1970s. They were kind of distressed. The owner had worn them, and it didn't matter. So I did that auction, and we were really happy with the results on that one. Okay, number 7. You know what? I lost track of what number I'm on. I think I'm on number 6. Anyway, I should probably just stop saying the number, but I'm kind of skipping around in these things, so that's why. Okay, so I think I will skip down and talk about this hot lather machine. It's like a shaving, like shave gel, shave foaming, shave whatever you call it, shaving cream. There you go. So anyway, it's by Conair, I believe, and this has been on my Bolo list for a long time in the whole reselling world, and I had never found one, or if I did, I found one a long, long time ago. And I found one, I would find them used and kind of grody and everything like that. But this one was still new in the package, and a lot of times Bolos kind of lose value over the years, but I looked it up real quick, and I was happy to see that this one had not lost its value. And so we sold this one very quickly, like in a day, for $72. So it kind of goes to show, keep your eyes open for those bolos, those things that you're kind of your bucket list things that you're not sure you're ever going to find. And you never know. Just keep your eyes open and you might find one. Okay, moving back on, let's go to number 7. So these are actually 2. I had found 2 of these. They're vintage 1980s workout leotards, workout wear, but they were new old stock, NOS, new old stock. So they still had their original tag. They were very 80s looking. And what was really interesting about them was that they were plus size. So one was a 1X, one was a 2X. So I was at the thrift store just kind of looking through activewear. I think that's where it was. And it kind of looked like a bathing suit, whatever. That might even have been activewear, swimwear, that kind of section. And I saw it and I was like, new with tags. I'm like, that's amazing, right? And so I bought that. So I came home, I listed it. I sold the first one for $60 and I was like, oh, that's super exciting. Now, I don't think the second one was there, or else I would have bought both. I think if it was there, I missed it. But the next time I was at the thrift store a couple days after I had sold it, I looked in that section again and found another one. And so it was kind of a no-brainer to go ahead and get it. And I sold that one for $60 as well, a little bit later. So yeah, $120, paid a few dollars at the thrift store. So, I mean, my lesson on that one, I think, is you kind of have to find the stuff that just looks different. The thrift store. So maybe you're at a thrift store with a bunch of resellers and a bunch of other pickers, and you're like, oh, I can't find the brands that all the resellers on YouTube talk about. Just kind of try to think outside the box a little bit and just look for something vintage, and you just never know what might end up being valuable. Something that you would think no one would have any interest in could be really popular. Okay, moving on. Lisa Frank is the subject of our next one, number 8. And if I'm getting all these numbers wrong, just ignore what I'm saying and look at the number on the screen. Anyway, I think we're on number 8. Lisa Frank, I found this organizer planner calendar type thing at the thrift store for a couple dollars. At first I was trying to figure out for sure whether it was vintage. Lisa Frank had a big popularity in the late 90s and Y2K. And so, of course, everything 90s and Y2K is popular again, and so Lisa Frank is no exception. There's also just collectors who have collected her all along. So I found this and I was trying to decide whether it was vintage or because it was in such good shape. My husband took one look at it and found the calendar page in it that actually said 2002. And I was like, oh, that would explain it. So I listed it. I think I started out pretty high, but then I dropped the price after a little bit of time, and I ended up selling it for $90, which I thought was a really good profit on that one. So Lisa Frank, there's still, I don't know if there's, I was reading something about Scandal, and I don't know whether they're still in production or not. Something tells me they're not, but they had been selling stuff. The Dollar Tree had been selling stuff up until recently. So there was current Lisa Frank as well. So you can Google Lisa Frank logos, and there's charts that kind of break it down to the different types of the different types of logos, and it helps you figure out the age of your piece and see if you can, or you could just find a date inside that would tell you right away. Okay, I don't really look at the media section. Moving on to number 9, I don't look at the media section every time I go to the thrift store. I think we were about to go on a road trip, and a lot of times I'll go over and I'll look for movies my kids can watch in the car on their portable DVDs. We're still kind of old school that way. And I look for audiobooks or things like that to just kind of, when you're driving cross country, those things are important. So I had come across this Jeeves and Wooster set, and it was still sealed. And I thought, oh, like this is one of my family's like favorite characters. They've read the books and we've watched the shows, and we usually have to go on YouTube, I think, to get episodes of the shows. And so I thought, oh, that's really good. If it's not worth anything, then we're just going to keep it and watch it. It was very exciting. It was the Jeeves and Wooster. I think it was like the whole episode, all the episodes. But I looked it up. And then I realized that we were going to just keep still watching Jeeves and Wooster on YouTube because it sold for $140. And it sold fairly quickly. So yeah, anyway, I mean, that's just a bolo Jeeves and Wooster. You might want to keep an eye out. Sealed was really important. But yeah, TV shows that you just can't get easily on rerun, those are always going to be worth looking up. Okay, moving on, some more hard goods. These were cups and saucers, and I found these at a yard sale. The brand is Rohrstrand, and I knew the brand from my selling on Etsy and selling a lot of Scandinavian and mid-century type things. And so I was at this yard sale. Now, here's my lesson on this one. Besides the fact that, Arabia, Finland, Rohrstrand, some of these can be worth good money. But I was at the yard sale and I pull up. It was really busy. And I recognized the woman running the sale as a woman who owns or runs an antique, like our biggest antique mall in town. And I thought, oh, great. Like, none of this stuff, it's all either going to be stuff she couldn't sell, which could be true, or just going to not be priced well or whatever. But I was actually pleasantly surprised. That was a really nice yard sale. Her prices were really reasonable. And it just goes to show, like, her market is very limited here in our town. And on eBay, you have a worldwide market. So I see these cups and saucers and I'm like, oh, Rohrstrand, like, that's nice. And they just were really attractive. And so I asked her the price, and I think she said like $3 or something. So I said, yeah, for sure, I'll take those. So I sold the whole set. I just sold them together, and they sold for $150. So you just never know. Not everybody knows everything, and not everybody is willing to sell online. She might have known they were worth more, but just wanted to move them on because she's not going to ship and package and something breakable, especially like that. I also managed to get some reference books that I was at her yard sale. She had some antique, and it's just kind of fun reading for me to kind of poke through. I do most of my research online these days, but I do have a little collection of reference books. So don't always be, I source sometimes at the antique mall as well. So there are things to be found everywhere. Okay, let's talk about Rae Dunn, number 11. So Rae Dunn, okay, you can't go to TJ Maxx and all these stores without it's like overwhelming. And it did have a heyday in the reselling world. There were people who would line up and wait for the new Rae Dunn to come out and grab stuff. And those were collectors, don't get me wrong. The collecting thing was really strong with Rae Dunn for a while, but there were also resellers who were there, and they would try to get the harder to find items and flip them quickly on eBay. It seemed for a while the market was really good on Mercari as well. Well, that's kind of played out a little bit, but there is a big market still for very early Rae Dunn. So Rae Dunn had she had an Etsy shop. I found some things through Google. Her Etsy shop, I think it's empty at the moment, but you can see her sold. And so she had Etsy, then Magenta came along, and then they worked together. And so there's a whole, you can Google it, there's a whole set of information about, what it says on the bottom, the early pieces, what they say on the bottom. And so this particular one was this little plaque. Now, I had sold something with the crown on it before, and I wasn't quite sure. Yeah, I knew the crown was kind of like an earlier design of hers. So I wasn't quite sure about this plaque. Now, I want to say that I ran an auction, but I'm looking back at my records and I don't think I did. So I think I found something that was close or similar to this, and I must have just set a price, but I ended up selling it for $220, and it was even. So I think it was an offer. It's possible it was an auction and it's just not showing up in my, because it was quite a few months ago, and so my records are limited on that. But $220, I found it at a thrift store, just sitting on the counter, sitting on the shelf, and it was like a little plaque you would hang up, outside your bathroom or whatever. And yeah, I was super excited about that. So I'm always on the lookout for the early Rae Dunn. Most Rae Dunn I'm going to take a look at anyway, but if it's got a TJ Maxx sticker or whatever, then I know not to bother. Okay, let's go to a pair of shorts. Let's see. I am on number 12 at this point. I'm kind of hopping around because I realized I had some really crazy, interesting, wild things, and then I didn't want to end on a bunch of boring things. So I'm just going to mix it up a little bit. So this is a brand that was new to me when I found it at the thrift store. It's just, I was in the activewear. I saw this pair of activewear. I think they're cycling shorts, and the brand is called Shredly. And I looked it up, and I was actually really surprised at the comps. Now, these were also a plus size, and so I sold them. Let's switch over. This was a Poshmark sale. So I sold them on Poshmark for $60. So I think they did sell once on eBay, got returned, and then they sold again on Poshmark for $60. So just wanted to throw out another Bolo brand for you. Shredly is the name, and you can look up the type of activewear that they have. I can't remember if it was all cycling or if they did other sports as well. Okay, let's go back to another crazy, surprising sale that I had this year. So this one might have been my top dollar one as well. So I see this cat, little fuzzy, furry cat, sitting on the shelf at a thrift store. And it was in the kitchenware. I think someone had picked it up and put it down. They had changed their mind on it. And, you can use words like kitschy or anthropomorphic when, like an animal is taking on human characteristics. And I just was like, you know what? People love this kind of stuff. It was like $3 or $4. And I thought, I know there's a collector base for this. The cat had big eyes. That's another keyword you use, big eyes. And people just love that little kitschy, type of look. So I bring the cat home, and, my family's like, oh, that's just kind of weird, right? And it's red, and like, it's just got a lot going on. Well, I think I started researching, but I wasn't really finding much that was super similar. And so I went onto Facebook into a group, I think. And then someone from the group messaged me privately. It was either that or I shared it on Instagram, and maybe someone messaged me privately there. But she was like, don't sell it too low. She's like, seriously. She's like, these are really hard to find. They're called fuzzies or furries or something like that. And they're hard to find. And, so once I had some better keywords, I could find some, different comps. And these were, selling for hundreds of dollars. Like, she told me, like, you need to put a really high price on it. And I was like, okay, if you say so. So if it's pink hair, I think it actually even would sell for more. But the red hair was kind of unusual enough as it is. And so we sold this cat for $400. And my family was just blown away. They were just like, are you serious? Like, I think I paid $4 or $3 or something, and it sold for $400 to a collector. So that's just fun. I mean, like, to me, that's just getting something into the hands of a collector. Like, she's not going to find, like, how would this person ever get this little cat in the middle of a small town in Montana, right? So just stuff is out there. That's just what's amazing to me about online reselling. Okay, let's move on to another surprising sale. Okay, so this one was, all credit goes to my husband on this one. I think we had moved here. He didn't list it right away. So it wasn't too long after we moved here, and he had gone out by him, like he was with somebody, but they stopped at an estate sale. And they ended up he brought home a hard hat. And I was like, okay, whatever, you know, he brings home guy stuff to sell and I'm like, okay, that's fine, whatever. So he started researching these hard hats and he's like, oh my goodness. He said certain hard hats can actually sell for really good money. They're super collectible. So we ended up selling this hard hat was by E.D. Bullard, and we've sold other Bullard ones since then, but they were plastic or whatever. This one was aluminum. It was goes by the name Hard Boiled. It was made in San Francisco, so I think where it's made, the condition, the material all play a role in it. And we sold that hard hat for $325. So I thought that was pretty good. So I believe that was number 14, maybe. But otherwise, we will just move on to another clothing sale. And now this one was fairly recently, and I think I just talked about it in one of my what sold videos. And it is a wool and cashmere coat, and the brand was not that important. It was made in Italy. What was important that you want to know is, I'm going to show a picture of the label here, but it was the material, the wool maker is Loro Piana. Now I've talked about it a few times on my channel, but that's just something you want to keep an eye out for. So the brand might be totally something else, but they use the material from Loro Piana in their clothing products that they make. So my husband found this in our little local bins earlier in the year and got it listed at the beginning of the cold weather this year, and we sold it for $200, and that was on Poshmark. Let's talk about a jewelry sale. I do like to sell mostly costume jewelry is what I end up selling. I'm totally fine with that. I'm not hugely interested in the big, dealing in gold and silver. I mean, if I came across it at a good price, I would do it, and that's what happened here. So I was at a little thrift store, and they only put out a little bit of jewelry here and there. A lot of the thrift stores don't. Goodwill sends it all to their online stores and auctions and things. And so I was at this little thrift store, and they put out a little bit of jewelry, but they usually do a once a year jewelry sale, which is actually coming up in April. I'm super excited about it. But anyway, so I always check to see what they've put out recently. And so I'm kind of poking through the necklaces, and I pick up this necklace. Honestly, I just want to say it did not feel like anything special. It felt like a Chico's necklace, or I don't know. It just kind of brightened. It didn't have an expensive look to it. The metal was textured and very lightweight. So I carried it around in my hand. I don't know. I don't think I could see the mark on it. Or if I did, all I saw was it said JR2, as in TWO. And it didn't mean anything to me. So I carried it around for a while. It was only a couple bucks. And then I was like, you know what? I might just go put this back. But let me look at it again. And I'll look at it with my phone this time, because I need glasses, but whatever. So I flip it over and I zoom in on the tag. That's right. I hadn't seen the maker yet. I zoom in on the tag with my phone and I see JR2, and I'm like, okay, that means nothing. Now, if I had at the moment flipped it over, it said 925 18K or something on the other side. So, but it was enough for me to just whip open my phone. I looked up JR2, and it's Judith Ripka. And I was like, I've totally heard of Judith Ripka, and I knew it was a good brand. So I'm like, okay, I'm definitely getting this. I get home, find out it says 925 18K. So there's just a tiny little bits of gold in the necklace. And then it turned out there were stones inside of that, and those were diamonds. So that necklace sold for $125 on Ruby Lane. And I almost put it back. So, see, I could have easily put it back, and I still make thrifting mistakes all the time. Okay, this is another recent one you've seen in my What Sold, but I just thought it was worth repeating or sharing with new viewers. I sold this this mixed lot of candlesticks that were all brass, and I sold it for $120. I collected these candlesticks at thrift stores and yard sales and estate sales all throughout the year, and then at the end of the year, whatever I have collected, I put together in a lot. Now, a lot of times I put them on Etsy, and I've sold lots for like $160 or so, and this year I decided to just throw them on eBay and see how it did there. It was a little bit of a smaller lot than I usually have. We basically just cleaned the candle wax out of them. We didn't polish or anything like that. And it sold super quickly for $120. And I believe, they get used at weddings, they get used at catered events or things like that to as a centerpiece, and people buy several lots and just, fill up their table with candles, and it's just very dramatic looking and everything. So that was what I decided to do, and I was glad. It sold, I think, overnight, I want to say. Okay, do I have any others? Oh, yes. Totally lost track of what number I'm on, but I'm going to pop the number up somewhere up here. Okay, this was a very interesting one. This is something... Now, if you're a jewelry seller at all, or if you sell things that have small writing, you may know what this is. It's called a loop, and it folds up like that. And this is just a 10x magnifier, right? So, it's just a little magnifying glass. You could hang it on a thing and have it around your neck and everything like that. So I have just cheapy ones laying around that I use for things. Well, years ago, my husband was working for somebody, and he'd worked for them for a while. His dad had worked for them, doing remodel and things. And she decided that, I think the husband had passed away, and so the wife had just ended up one day giving my husband a few little odds and ends, little vintage things that, weren't super important to her or anything, but they just had belonged to her husband. And so she said, "Do you want any of this stuff?" So he brought it home, and he just kind of hung on to it, and he just thought it was kind of cool. Like, he would use the loop. One of them was a loop, okay? And so, he would just use it and everything like that. Well, one day, we just were like, you know what? He's like, I wonder if this is worth anything. And he looked it up, and he almost fell over, because people collect loops. Like who knew, right? Okay, not this one. This is just a cheapy one. But the one he had was vintage. I don't know how old it was, but it was by Bausch & Lomb, and it was a 14x magnifier. And we looked through comps and solds or whatever, and he's like, I'm gonna put it up for $350 and see what happens. And somebody bought it, and we were just like, oh my goodness, right? So we didn't know anything about this. Now, here's our little lesson. I'm gonna try to tell this story quickly. But here's our little lesson in customer service, okay? So you got to stand up for yourself, but you also, it pays to be nice. So it had a little bit of damage. It had a repair to the part where you could add like a cord, a lanyard. And we didn't know that. Like, we didn't know what we were looking for. And unfortunately, I don't think we ended up getting really good pictures of every single angle. We thought we had it all covered, but we weren't sure. And we get a reply, from the buyer. Oh, there's damage. You didn't disclose it. It was repaired. Da 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 da. So we just did what we normally do. And I said, hey, if you're not satisfied, just go ahead, and if you're disappointed with your purchase, just go ahead and return it. So he went off on us. The poor guy, he just was, I'm disappointed that you were trying to be dishonest and that you tried to cover up this damage so you could get top dollar. And I'm disappointed, and, that the only solution is for me to take my time and buy a label and, ship it back and blah, 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 blah. So I just was like, you know what, sometimes people do try to kind of bully you into refunds or things like that. And I thought, you know what, what I didn't appreciate was being accused of being dishonest. Like, we just didn't know much about this thing at all. And the other thing is we had it priced at $350, but we also had best offer on it. So since we didn't know much about it, we figured it's up to the buyer to kind of make an offer if it's not worth it. Yeah, maybe the pictures didn't show exactly what he was talking about, so that could be part of it. So we were totally willing to take the return. He wouldn't even be paying for the return, all that kind of stuff. Well, it turns out, so I went back to him and I said, well, I'm disappointed that your first thought is that I was being dishonest and everything. I said, I don't know what we would gain from the fact of hiding damage, because you're going to see it as soon as you get it, right? So there's no benefit to me to hide the damage. And anyway, I was very polite, but I was very firm. And I said, this is eBay's policy or their procedure that they have in place, and you won't even have to, you could even schedule a pickup. Like, you won't even be out a lot of trouble. So he comes back and he says that he was going to keep it because he was an older gentleman, and he collected them, and he wasn't sure he'd ever find one again. And so he just said his wife was in hospice. He couldn't visit her because of the COVID lockdowns. And, so there was a reason why he was so stressed out, and he lashed out at us. And so sometimes that's just really the case, and we have to kind of, not jump to conclusions. I didn't immediately oh, he's trying to scam us or anything like that. But we went back and forth. He ended up apologizing. And then I sent a nice, comment back, and, basically said that we would send him a partial refund if he needed to go get it repaired or if there was anything he needed done to it. And he really appreciated it. It ended up being a very lovely interaction, and I felt so bad for him dealing with his wife, and he really missed her and everything like that. So that was the story behind that sale. But it was, we either refunded $50 back to him or something. So probably a $300 sale by the end of it. Okay, the next sale is a baseball cap. So from my what solds recently that I really do love selling hats and accessories. And so this was one I had forgotten. We were trying to think of what our highest hat sale was, and I thought it was one coming up that will be in my what sold next week. But I think we realized after I went back and was looking at all our sales that, of course, no, this was our highest baseball cap sale. It was Minnesota Timberwolves, and it sold for $120. And it was by Sports Specialties, which is just a brand that's good to know for, it's just good to know for vintage baseball caps. I don't know anything about sports. My husband doesn't much either. I don't even really like to get into fan gear and things like that because I just don't know that much, but I'm pretty sure this was vintage. And anyway, it sold for $120. Next one, paint by number. Okay, so paint by numbers will definitely depend. Their value will depend on subject matter and age and how well they were done. I had gotten this paint by number on one of my trips. I think the trip when we moved here, right before we moved here, when we were looking for a place to live, I had gotten it on that trip. And it was a fairly large size, and I knew the subject matter was very, very good. It was Southwestern, Western, horse, cowboy, all that kind of stuff. There is a website. It's like the Paint by Number Museum, and you can look up your paint by number and find out what the original kit was called, like all that kind of stuff. So a lot of collectors for paint by numbers, and we sold this large paint by number for $225 after we just had it hanging on our wall for a while. Okay, I'm going to share another clothing sale that we had that also teaches a little bit of a lesson. The brand is Carhartt. resellers talk about Carhartt, excited to find it. Vintage Carhartt can do pretty good. We've learned over the years of finding it that there's certain pieces that sell better than others. And one of the pieces we found out recently was definitely a bolo, was the Carhartt Detroit jacket. And it's a blanket lined jacket. And we sold ours on Poshmark for $165. And that was with a logo embroidered on the jacket. So without the logo, it probably would have been closer to 200. Now, the way to know that it's a Detroit jacket, besides the blanket lining, is every tag on Carhartt has a code, like a style code. And so for the Detroit jacket, it starts with J97. And then like this particular jacket, the next three letters are the color code. So it's GVL. So that was, I think gravel was the color, like a gray. So gravel. But it could be BRN for brown, or, you know, they have different color names, and certain colors are actually collectible as well and can add to the value if it's a rarer color. So that's my little Carhartt lesson. There are other pieces of Carhartt that sell well also, but that one has just kind of been jumping out at me recently from other resellers, and everything that I thought I would pass on to you is the Detroit jacket. We were really happy to get $165 for that. I think I just picked it up at the thrift store. I don't have any special story or memory of that. Okay, looking through my list, I think we are finishing up. I think that was number 21. And I did that one, I did that one, I did that one. The last one I wanted to talk about, I kind of cheated a little bit because the sales, it was a flatware sale. And it started being sold in 2021 and it finished up in 2022. So I decided to include it because I just wanted to explain about this flatware. I found a set of flatware at a thrift store for about $25. It was in like a flatware box, and they just had wrapped it in like shrink wrap. And I could see that it was a shell pattern, which can be pretty consistent selling, and it was Reed & Barton, and I was like, oh, that's really nice. So there are a couple different shell patterns by Reed & Barton. Some are not as worth as much as the others, but this happened to be the really good stuff. So I made a variation listing. I sometimes do my flatware listings different ways. Sometimes I would sell, if I just sold the whole lot at once, it might sell for like $300 or $350. I could divide it up. I could sell 4 forks at a time, 4 spoons at a time, and you'll make a little bit more money. I decided to sell it piece by piece and just make up a variation listing, and then buyers can pick, I need 2 forks, I need 3 spoons, and they can just make their own listing. And a lot of people did that. So altogether, if I added it correctly, so far I have made $846 from my original $25 investment on that flatware. So that was definitely worth it. And that was a really, really good find. And I still have some pieces left in that variation listing. It's just kind of sitting. I probably just need to go in and end it, pull out whatever's left. I think it's like butter spreaders are pretty much the only thing left. And I should just make a listing separately for those. But I'm actually glad I ended on a flatware listing, because I wanted to announce, okay, that was 22 listings or 22 sales, fun sales. I hope you enjoyed them from 2022. But as we go into 2023, I have got some plans. I've got some things I need to get listed. I have things I need to catch up on. One of those things is flatware. So I have deemed January 2023 to be my flipping flatware month. So you can look forward to content about selling flatware, and you could be really surprised at the profit margins that are in stainless flatware. I'm not even talking sterling or silver plate or anything. That's a whole other kettle of fish. This is just stainless flatware. and I have made much good money over the years selling flatware. So I'm going to share some of that information with you. I have not been selling it so much lately. Long story, but we're going to talk about that later. And I need to get a bunch of flatware listed. So I'm going to be focusing on flatware in the month of January, and I'm going to do some accountability posts that you can help me with, and I'll share what pieces have been selling. And then also, I'm just going to do some videos about what to look for and how to list it and how to find the pattern and all that kind of stuff. So if that's something that you think you'd be interested in, of course, hit the subscribe button and you will get notified when I post those videos. So that will be the month of January, and we're going to do similar topics for the next few, months going into 2023. So yes, please. And don't forget, before you leave, to leave a comment below of your best, funnest, most interesting, profitable sale of 2022. I would love to read those. So thank you everybody for sticking with me, and I have nothing left to say. So we'll see you next time.